You just came back from Afghanistan?
Yeah.
How was that? Talk about that.
Wow. Well, to give some background, I had announced when I released the record, The Third World, that I was going to give a portion of the proceeds of it towards an orphanage and a school medical center in Afghanistan. I was approached by a human rights organization called OMAID. And basically, I took them up on their offer, and they seemed like they were very sincere. And it also struck me kind of crazy because here were not only a group of people that were willing to go back with me, but most of them were women too. You know what I mean? And in a place like Afghanistan where women were treated like second-class citizens by a regime that the United States at the time was supporting. I mean, we gave the Taliban money up until, May of 2001,
Right.
May less than half a year, before September 11th. So I think to put that into perspective and to see how much the area has been affected by the war with Russia, and there were a lot of very striking things to me about Afghanistan. For example, there are cranes all over the city that are just not being used, like huge construction cranes left by the Russians after they kicked them out. And they keep them there as a testament, saying you never finished building what you wanted to build here. And you're never going to finish building what you wanted.
So it's
here.
almost like
There's still minefields, but the minefields are ill. They're not just on the ground. They're minefields like on the side of the mountain, because that's where people climb up to get a better position. And they used to line the sides of the mountain with C4. So when the Taliban or the Russians came by, they would just bomb the side of the mountain and bring the whole thing down on them. I went to a place called Panjshir, where the whole country basically in the larger cities has a de facto curfew. So it's not like they say you can't go out at night, but literally I'll be in the Jeep traveling to where we're traveling, and every intersection there'll be two dudes with AKs, right? And they'll sit there and they'll ask for your papers, and sometimes they'll look at you and wave you through. But if you go to a major intersection, you'll find like 6 dudes. Everyone's got an AK. Everyone's sitting there staring at you, and they'll probably have an SUV with a Pika, which is like a high-caliber Russian machine gun that they keep over the edge of it, that they have mounted on the turret. So there's not a light nightlife like you would imagine there being in other places. But, I mean, in Panjshir, there was none of that. It was like I couldn't spot a soldier. I mean, there are so many different places. But then again, that would be a spot where, the Russians weren't able to invade, where the Taliban try to invade, and they just leave the tanks and the armored personnel carriers like in the side of the mountain, by the side of the road, riddled with machine gun bullets, riddled with anti-tank rounds, with RPGs still stuck in it, being like, look, don't come over here starting none, or you're going to end up just like that. Being like, yo, we don't need to have no police, because you ain't going to make it out of here. You can steal some, but where are you going to go? Wow. There's only one road here and one road back.
Why go over there? Why do it?
Well, I mean, I felt like I wanted to invest my money in something real, and that's another part of the difference in between me and a lot of other rappers. I mean, I don't feel a necessity to flaunt my wealth or to act like I'm something I'm not.
Right.
I'm just comfortable being me.
Yeah.
I'm not one of them rappers that, is so hardcore that he pretends he doesn't know how to use a computer or something like that. I'm so gangster that I don't know how to work email. You stupid bastard, what's wrong with you, Are you a person, or are you just a caricature in a Donald Goines book? Like, who are you trying to be, man?
Yeah.
The point is that nowadays you got to be a man before you could be anything else.
Yeah, definitely.
How are you even putting on a front for who? For young and impressionable children? You 30 years old. You acting like you 14.
Yeah.
Grow up, man. So to me, the perspective that I had was, I'm going to come here, do what I need to do, help these people, and at the same time learn something about myself. Realize that out here in America, we are desensitized to homelessness, but if we seen a homeless child, it would be completely different. Yeah. Out there, homeless children are very common. And to me, that's always been, a very serious thing for me to think about, and also to put myself in that position too. So when I went out there, we set up, I don't want to say the neighborhood exactly, but we set up a place where it could hold about 20 children. So we started off very small, but I still felt real positive, because when I left, there were kids living there already. And I realized that I had changed these people's lives. And it was just the whole aspect of it, and to see the entire country and to realize that if these children hadn't been there, they might have died of exposure or been sold into slavery or prostitution or been drafted into a fundamentalist militia. You know, it really let me know a lot about what we're doing there also. You know, it let me know more about the struggle in itself and about how, you know, of course I realized that the Taliban was a Pakistani creation, but they had help through the United States, through Saudi Arabia. You know, you get to understand a lot more about the history behind it. Yeah. Way too much for us to go into detail with now. Yeah. But just to say that, you know, Afghanistan is not in the Middle East. It's in Central Asia. And, of course, why would anybody want to leave and just give that away to the people once they have it themselves? It shares a border with Pakistan, with all three former Soviet satellites, part of the USSR. They share a border with China and with Iran. So they're sitting there thinking, okay, we can move whatever down, even though these countries to the north are supposed to have independence from Russia. We really know that, you know, at some point Russia is still controlling a part of their economy. You know, there are a lot of natural resources, not to mention 90% of the heroin that comes into America comes from a country that we control. So when you see them fiends in the street, you know, it's not a coincidence. I think that there's a lot of things that I really had to absorb and learn about that region, and also some personal soul searching too. Yeah. People ask me things that I didn't expect them to ask. You know, they were like, you know, do you think God sent you here? And I was like, what? Hold on, what were you talking about? And I was like, you think God sent you here? Like, you think that's why you're here, to help these children? And I really never thought of it that way. You know, I figured, you know, I'm doing this at my own free will, whatever. And they said, wait a minute, it doesn't matter what God you believe in. But if you think about it, you were born in a military hospital in South America. Right. You moved to NY, right? You lived your life. You said, you know, you were trying to go to school and you were wilding out on the streets. You went to prison. You got out. You became a successful underground rapper. You built this orphanage just using underground hip-hop money. Which isn't crazy. No corporate sponsor, right? Yeah. And then after all that, you went through Dubai, and then you flew over here, and then you built the orphanage, and now you're going to go home and you're alive. And I was like, damn, you know, I never really thought of it that way. But I guess deep, if there's a God, you know, I'm sure he had a hand in some of that. So yeah, that's a beautiful thing. I guess that's what it is. Knock down the towers. I pledge no allegiance, nigga, fuck the president's speeches. I'm baptized by America and covered in leeches. The dirty water that bleaches your soul and your facial features, drowning you with propaganda that they spit through the speakers. And if you speak about the evil that the government does, the Patriot Act to track you to the type of your blood. They try to frame you and say you was trying to sell drugs and throw a federal indictment on niggas to show you love. This shit is run by fake Christians, fake politicians. Look at their mansions.